When Evan slid the divorce papers over, his fingers tapped the walnut tabletop, the sound light, like the muffled thunk when the last load-bearing piece is pulled from one of those award-winning architectural models we designed together. Grace, let's get a divorce. Vivian, she needs me. Outside the window was the skyline view our firm prides itself on. The setting sun turned the glass curtain walls into molten gold. I lifted the cold coffee at my side but didn't drink. I only felt the cup's chill seeping into my fingertips. 10 years, from the green kids pulling all-nighters in the architecture department drafting room to the stubborn girl and boy who became, behind the EG Design sign, the acknowledged soul and skeleton of the firm. For years of dating, 6 years of marriage, he handled bringing projects to life. I made dreams breathe on paper and in concrete. So many landmarks were born from our hands, so many accolades piled on us. In the end, he told me he needed to care for an assistant designer who had been on staff for less than 2 years. Fine. My voice was steadier than I expected, like the straightest line drawn with a T-square. The next day we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The process went quickly. The staff asked the usual questions. Evan pressed his lips together, and I answered for him: incompatible principles, irretrievable breakdown of the relationship. Such an official-sounding remark. Having received the receipt for the divorce cooling-off period, Evan seemed to relax, though he also bore a trace of inexplicable irritation. I'll give you a ride. He opened the car door and habitually pointed to the passenger seat. I didn't stop. I walked straight to the back door and climbed in. In the rearview mirror, his brows tightened for a moment. The car merged into the evening rush-hour traffic. He was probably in a decent mood. His fingertips tapped lightly on the steering wheel. The car's Bluetooth, connected to his phone, suddenly rang, the ringtone a trendy, saccharine tune. He answered without even looking. Vivian's soft, syrupy voice sounded, "Evan, I'm still revising the cross-section plans for that resort. My head is spinning, my stomach hurts, I haven't eaten much all day." Evan's tone immediately softened to the point it could drip. "Sweetheart, don't push yourself. I'll be right over. What do you want to eat? Seafood congee? Crab roe buns?" Listening to their warm murmurs over the radio, my stomach churned, not sadness, but a physical nausea. The car had just passed an intersection when I tapped his seat back. "Pull over up ahead. This is my stop." He didn't ask questions and pulled to the curb. I opened the door and got out, walking straight into the familiar private clinic on the corner without looking back. The female doctor I'd booked was already waiting for me. "Miss Grace, the results are in." She handed me the test sheet, her tone gentle. "Congratulations, you're pregnant, about 6 weeks." The clinic was warm, but a chill ran up my spine. In the early years of our marriage we wanted a child so badly we went to every hospital. Both sides were told there was nothing wrong, yet nothing happened. Later the firm got busier and that hope was put aside. Now the blueprint had shattered, and this unexpected small puzzle piece had arrived. I stared at the blurry little speck on the ultrasound printout, my fingertips icy. The doctor was still listing precautions. I cut her off. "Please arrange the surgery for me, the sooner the better." The doctor paused for a moment, didn't press further, and nodded, "All right. Shall I notify Mr. Evan?" "No need." I tugged at the corner of my mouth. "This is my matter." The surgery was scheduled for a week later. In the meantime, Evan, with Vivian at his side, became the center of industry gossip. First they made a conspicuous appearance at a real estate developer's cocktail party. Vivian wore the latest season from the couture house I often ordered from, hooked her arm through his, her smile shy but edged with unmistakable pride. Photos circulated through a few private group chats. Then someone spotted them at the sushi restaurant we once loved, the one that required a 3-month reservation, celebrating some anniversary. My best friend Sophia was so furious she yelled into the phone, "EG Design, without your work, Grace, what is Evan even? What did that Vivian draw, anyway?" That little museum proposal was torn to pieces by the client, worth nothing, and I heard Evan had to personally go clean up the mess. "Grace, are you just going to stand there and watch?" I stared at the computer screen. On EG Design's official website, my name still hung under co-founder and design director, and beneath it were the fruits of our shared labor: the internationally awarded City Library, the Mountain Art Museum covered by countless magazines, each like a magnificent tombstone. Stand there? I nudged the mouse and opened my personal cloud drive. Inside lay, quietly, all the core design sketches, concept drawings, and source files of ideas accumulated over the years. This was the soul of EG Design, and the foundation of my life and work. Sophia, do me a favor, let something slip, say I, Grace, am setting up on my own. The message landed like a stone thrown into a still lake. That night the phone rang. Not Evan, it was Vincent, chairman of Xingjing Real Estate, our biggest and most demanding investor. His voice came through the receiver. Miss Grace, I heard there's been some changes between you and Mr. Grace? He didn't say divorce, but the meaning was clear. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city lights outside. Mr. Vincent is well connected, he has some personal matters to attend to. But rest assured, the new Municipal Art Museum scheme is my own child. Whatever happens, I will see it through. Only the party executing it later might change. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Vincent laughed, and there was an understanding in his tone. Understood. Miss Grace's professionalism and I are something Xingjing absolutely trusts. Let's have tea another day and talk it over? That was the direction things were taking. After hanging up, I opened my email. An unread message came from the director of City A's Art Museum, who is also our new museum project's artistic advisor. The subject line was simple: a conversation about the soul of the new museum. I opened it. The message was even simpler, only one line and an address: Grace, free to talk? Tomorrow at 3 p.m., Chenwai Tea House. Julian. Julian, a figure appears in my mind. Lean, always wearing high-quality cotton linen shirts, his gaze so calm it seemed to hold the blank that follows all clamor. We'd had several in-depth discussions about the new gallery project. His understanding of space, light, and the human element often made me feel like I'd found an equal on the board, a keen observer. The next afternoon, at the dustless tea house, Julian was already there, seated by the window, a cup of clear tea before him, steam curling up. Sunlight filtered through bamboo blinds, casting mottled light across his profile. Miss Grace, he rose and pulled out my chair for me, the movement natural and fluent, with no affected attentiveness. Director Julian, sorry to keep you waiting. I just got here. He motioned for me to sit, his gaze resting on my face for a moment, not prying, but gently perceptive. I've been having some new ideas about the new museum's concept as a city living room and wanted to run them by you. Of course, if it's inconvenient to talk shop today. I lifted the teacup, the faint astringency of the tea slid down my throat, bringing a sliver of clarity. It's fine. Sometimes work is an anchor. We began to talk about the new museum, about that vast glass curtain wall that blurred interior and exterior, about how to breathe life into the cold architecture so people would pause and truly breathe. He spoke neither hurriedly nor slowly, his views original yet never aggressive, exactly the kind of impression he gave. We were deep in conversation when the wind chime at the teahouse door rang crisply. I looked up instinctively and met two pairs of eyes looking our way. Evan, and Vivian, arm looped through his, wearing an obviously newly purchased designer outfit. Vivian saw me, her eyes flickering, and she drew closer to Evan. Evan's expression darkened in an instant, his gaze swept past Julian opposite me and finally settled on my face. He took Vivian by the arm and strode over, a shadow falling across our little table. Grace, what a coincidence, who is this? Aren't you going to introduce us? The tone was as if he'd caught his wife in the act of cheating. Julian set down his teacup, expression unchanged, even carrying a polite detachment. He looked at Evan, then at me, as if silently asking, "Want me to handle this?" I met Evan's questioning gaze, and the last ripples in my heart finally stilled. I lifted the teacup, gently blew the foam aside, and spoke in a clear, calm voice. Evan, this is a public place. Also, please remind your assistant, it's fine to copy my style, but next time pick a size that fits. The shoulders there are too tight. Vivian's face went pale in an instant. She reflexively reached to tug at the fabric at her shoulder, a somewhat ridiculous motion. Evan's expression darkened further. He stared at me, his eyes full of anger and perhaps a hint of mortification at being exposed in public, exposing that the woman he'd meticulously dressed was nothing more than a clumsy imitator. "Grace!" His voice dropped, warning in tone. Julian rose at just the right moment, composed, his posture like an invisible barrier between me and the two of them. He didn't look at Evan, his eyes fell on me, asking, "Miss Grace, would you like to move somewhere quieter to continue our conversation?" I stood as well, picking up the cashmere coat draped over the back of the chair. "No need. We've covered most of what needed to be discussed. Director Julian, I'll send the detailed plan for optimizing the flow of the new museum's urban lounge to your email as soon as possible." My gaze skimmed over Evan's sullen face and settled on Vivian's cowering figure. My tone was even, untroubled. "Enjoy your tea, both of you. The Bailuo Chen here is quite good." With that I walked straight past them and pushed open the wooden door of the dustless tea house. The late autumn wind drove the fallen leaves inside, no footsteps followed behind me, only muffled from within the door came Evan's suppressed rebuke and Vivian's tear-tinged defenses. The hard weight that had been lodged against my chest seemed to be somewhat scattered by that cold wind. The surgery was scheduled for 3 days later. Sophia took time off and insisted on staying with me. The private hospital's single room was very quiet. A nurse came in to make the pre-op preparations and asked gently, "Where are the family members?" "A signature is required." The nurse held a folder. "I'll sign for myself." I reached out my hand. Sophia held my hand, her eyes a little red. "Grace. It's okay." I patted the back of her hand, took the pen, and wrote my name in the next of kin box. The pen's tip scraped the paper with a soft rustle, putting a full stop on a relationship that hadn't yet taken shape. I lay in the makeshift ward, a dull ache pooling in my lower abdomen, reminding me that there had once been a small life there. Sophia stood at the bedside, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you feel? Does it hurt?" I shook my head, my gaze fixed on the ceiling. Something deep inside me had been completely ripped away, and with it the carefully constructed blueprints of the past 10 years that I had believed were unbreakable had been emptied out. There was no expected, heart-wrenching agony, only exhaustion. "Does he know?" Sophia asked cautiously. "No need." I closed my eyes. Evan was probably scrambling to deal with the mess Vivian had made, or plotting how to use the managerial tricks he excelled at to fill the shell whose soul he had personally extracted. A week later, I moved out of that penthouse. It had been bought after our firm's first big project succeeded, with an excellent view and a renovation that had absorbed countless hours of my effort. Every corner, every light had once been the embodiment of my inspiration. Now, looking at it again, it felt like an exquisite specimen, sealing away a period of time that had died. I hired a moving company and had them take only my personal belongings and several thick original design manuscript volumes locked in the study safe, plus the external hard drive stuffed with years of core design electronic files. These are my lifeline, they are the true beating heart beneath the EG design name. Items that belonged to Evan I had the movers neatly boxed and stacked in a corner of the living room. I took one last look around, my gaze passing over the furniture and artworks we had chosen together, without a trace of longing. I left the keys on the entry cabinet and closed the door behind me, shutting off an era. Preparations for the personal studio were in full swing. Sophia used all her contacts in the media circle, quietly but effectively letting the word out. The location was chosen in the city center, an old Western-style house that offered a peaceful haven amid the bustle, preserving its original brick walls and arched windows. Before the studio even had an official sign, phones and emails were pouring in. Mr. Vincent from Xinjiang was the first to call, arranging to meet at a more private tea house next door to Chenwai. "Miss Grace, congratulations on the new studio." Mr. Vincent beamed and personally poured my tea. "We've held several board meetings about the new museum building plan, and everyone agreed, only you personally handling it will put us at ease." As for the executing party, he dragged out the words and shrewdly studied my expression. At Xinjiang we recognize plans, not people. The contract can be signed with your new studio at any time. I lifted the teacup, the brew was clear. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Vincent. For details, my assistant will be in touch with your legal team as soon as possible. Mr. Vincent clapped his hands. Great. By the way, will Miss Grace honor us with her presence at next week's Industry Charity Gala? A few old friends will be there and would love to meet you. The old friend he mentioned was, of course, one of those few who controlled the city's core development resources. I'll definitely be there, I replied with a smile. It was a signal. I needed to stand under that light and let everyone see that Grace was independent. That night at the party I chose a simple black slip gown, without any extra adornment, wearing only a pair of small pearl studs. Sophia stayed by my side and whispered, "Look over there." I didn't need to look to feel that scorching gaze. Evan had arrived, and unsurprisingly Vivian was beside him. Vivian wore a shimmering silver wrap dress, her makeup impeccable, forcing her back straight as she tried to blend into the clinking glasses, glittering world of fame and fortune. But her eyes were unfocused, carrying a hint of shaky bravado. Evan held a wine glass, speaking with a senior figure in the industry, his expression not particularly pleasant. That elder was notorious for being stubborn and only caring about skill. I caught fragments drifting over. Evan, the recent concepts your firm has been submitting lack spirit, they're too craftsmanlike. Compared to that library from when Grace was around, they're nowhere near. Evan's jaw tightened again. I withdrew my gaze, carrying my champagne, and walked toward the circle surrounded by a few real estate tycoons. Vincent saw me and immediately waved with a smile. Miss Grace is here, come, we've been talking about the new gallery's urban living room, Mr. Wang and the others are very interested. In an instant, the focus shifted and their eyes landed on me. I stepped forward, calmly took up the conversation, and spoke about how that glass curtain wall would bring outdoor light and shadow into the interior through the seasons, how it would blur boundaries and create a space for dialogue between people and the city. There were no ornate phrases, only an understanding of the essence of space and clear logic. I saw genuine interest and approval appear in the eyes of several of the tycoons. Evan was left standing there. He tried to squeeze in with Vivian, someone courteously nodded to him, but their attention remained fixed on me. Vivian stood beside him like a sorely out-of-place decorative vase. Trying to make an impression, she piped up, "We also did a lot of optimizations on the curtain wall's load-bearing structure, Mr. Evan included." The air went quiet for a moment, and the few big shots exchanged a look, but said nothing. Load-bearing structure is an engineering issue. Bringing it up in a discussion about design philosophy and spatial aesthetics felt awkward and amateurish. Vincent gave a short laugh. Technical issues, we'll talk later. Vivian's face flushed instantly, helpless, she looked toward Evan. Evan's gaze darkened. He yanked Vivian's arm hard, she stumbled from the pole, and some champagne sloshed from her glass, splashing onto the silver skirt and leaving a small stain. Several gazes swept over them. Vivian's eyes immediately reddened, she bit her lower lip and held back tears. The carefully crafted image she had built to replace me cracked open in that yank and that splash. Evan realized he'd lost his composure and hissed under his breath, "Hands to yourself." He irritably let go, his gaze sweeping past the crowd and settling on me. I met his eyes calmly and took a sip of the chilled sparkling wine in my glass. The liquid slid down my throat, bringing a faint sting. "Look, Evan, without me standing by your side to shield you from storms outside your field and to gauge the tone of every conversation, you and your new blueprint would struggle even in this most basic arena of fame and fortune. This is only the beginning." The reception was winding down when Julian finally appeared. He was still in that textured cotton linen shirt, standing out as particularly fresh and refined among the crowd's finery. He walked straight toward me, ignoring the more or less obvious glances around us. His gaze settled on my face with gentle concern. "Sorry, something came up at the gallery, so I'm late. Are you all right? You look a little tired." I answered honestly, I'm fine. Events like this are draining. He took the nearly empty glass from my hand with complete naturalness and set it on the waiter's tray. Come on, I'll take you home. Places like this make it easy to get lightheaded if you stay too long. His voice was neither high nor low, just enough for the few nearby who had pricked up their ears to hear clearly. It was a silent posture, a proclamation. I did not refuse. I nodded to Sophia, then left with Julian under the scrutiny of many gazes. At the door, the cool night wind rushed in. Julian opened the car door for me, his hand gentlemanly resting on the top of the door frame. Thank you, Director Julian. Sitting in the passenger seat, I whispered my thanks. Just call me Julian. He started the car, his profile looked sharply defined in the dashboard's faint glow. What are you thanking me for? I was just going the same way. He paused, his voice unusually clear in the quiet cabin. Also, Grace, your city's living room, it's worth a purer beginning. The carriage was very quiet. He didn't force conversation, the silence wasn't awkward but felt like a soft buffer, separating the earlier party's clamor from the chill in my chest. Stop at the intersection up ahead. I pointed to the nearby old Western-style house. The studio lights were still on. They're still tidying up inside, so I won't invite you up. Julian pulled over as instructed. He turned and fixed his gaze on my face. Get some good rest. The detailed plan for the art museum's new wing isn't urgent. Wait until your foundation here is solid, then we'll talk. I unbuckled my seatbelt and smiled. Right now I'm just an empty frame. He smiled softly too. An empty frame is better, rebuild it to your own taste. That would be the real Grace architecture. He paused, then added, if you need recommendations for construction crews or suppliers, just say the word. I opened the car door. Thanks. You're welcome. He watched me get out until I went through the door, then started the car and left. The studio still smelled of fresh paint and wood, a few workers were doing the final touches. Sophia was curled up on a corner sofa, typing away at her laptop. She sprang up as soon as she saw me come in. Well? Didn't that pair of scoundrels just die of envy? Her eyes sparkled, carrying the thrill of a long-awaited revenge. You didn't see it. After you left, Evan's face, TSK, looked like he'd been scrubbed with pan scum. Vivian cried so hard her makeup ran. Serves her right. I took off my coat and hung it up. I saw it. Here, look at this. Sophia turned her laptop screen toward me. It was the back end of a public account she ran that followed the local design scene. Under the latest post the comments had exploded. The headline was blunt, at the feast, EG's new design star fades, sole designer Grace sets out independently. The accompanying photos were chosen to sting. One shows me calmly speaking in the crowd, the other shows Evan gripping Vivian's arm, a conspicuous wine stain on Vivian's skirt. The comments were even better. I've long felt EG's recent designs lack inspiration, guess the soul really left. That Vivian is a designer? She seems like a trophy. What she said at the party was completely off the mark. Evan's getting full of himself, huh? Grace has won international awards, who does he think he is? Support Miss Grace's independence. Can't wait for her new work. The wind had completely shifted. Well done. I patted Sophia on the shoulder. Public opinion is a blade, wield it well, and it saves a lot of effort. In the days that followed I was so busy my feet hardly touched the ground. Signing the independent design contract for Xinjiang Gallery's new building was only the beginning. Hiring assistants, liaising with suppliers, negotiating new collaborations, each task required my personal attention. The faint, sinking ache I had felt deep inside my body had long since vanished. News from Evan came in sporadically. I heard he tried to bid on a cultural center project in the new district under the name EG Design, but he didn't even pass the initial screening. I heard that a small commercial space renovation Vivian was in charge of had to be redone because the construction drawings were terribly wrong, and the client took them straight to the industry association. I heard that the firm's lead designer, Leo, the one who used to stay up drawing with me, handed in his resignation. On a cold, damp afternoon, I was reviewing a set of structural drawings when someone knocked at the door. My assistant Tina poked her head in. "Miss Grace, there's a visitor, he says he's Mr. Evan. No appointment. Do you want to see him?" My pen paused on the paper, leaving a tiny ink blot. I looked up. "Show him in." When Evan walked in, he carried the chill of the outdoors with him. He had gotten a little thinner, dark circles shadowed under his eyes, and the shoulder of his suit jacket was soaked from the rain. "Sit." I pointed to the chair opposite, my tone as flat as if receiving an ordinary client. He didn't sit. He went straight to my desk and planted his hands on the edge. "Grace, what on earth do you want?" I put my pen down and leaned back in my chair. "Mr. Grace, I don't understand what you mean by that." "Don't understand?" He seemed provoked by my calmness. "Wasn't it you who pried the Xinjiang project away? Was Leo's resignation your doing? And the cultural center bid failed, were you the one tripping us up behind the scenes? Grace, don't be so ruthless. E.g. design is your labor too." "Labor?" I repeated softly, lifting my head with nothing but sarcasm in my eyes. "Evan, do you even remember how the name E.g. design came about? The E from your name and the G from mine. From the start it was our child, the product of both of us. You were the one who ripped the heart out of that child with your own hands. And now you come to accuse me of destroying it? I only took what was mine, my designs, my name, and the clients who believed in me. The empty shell left behind was you and Vivian running it. Didn't it collapse quite naturally?" Evan flinched as if someone had stepped on his tail. "You hate me, so you want to destroy it, destroy me?" I suddenly found it a little laughable. "Evan, you think too highly of yourself. Hate takes effort. I'm very busy right now, busy building the blueprint that truly belongs to my Grace. I don't have time to waste energy hating you or on things that don't matter." His face went pale in an instant. Those words "don't matter" were more cutting than any accusation, utterly negating the 10 years we had shared and denying every place he had held in my life. "Don't matter," he murmured, repeating the words. "Don't matter, huh? Then tell me, what happened that day at the dustless tea house with that Julian of yours? How long has it been since you divorced me? Haven't you?" "Evan!" I sprang up and slapped him coldly. "Watch your words and remember your place. Who I meet and what I do is none of your business. When you paraded Vivian around town, did you ever think about how I felt? And now you want to play the victim?" His words caught in his throat. For a moment he was speechless. "And don't you dare pin all the mess you and Vivian made on me. That commercial space project of Vivian's, the construction drawings were wrong. They had to redo it, the losses ran into the millions, the client demanded compensation. How is any of that my fault? Leo quit because he saw no future for example design. Isn't that because you let a half-baked designer like Vivian meddle in core design? Evan, face it. Without my designs, e.g. design is nothing. Without me smoothing over relationships and shielding you from non-professional trouble, you and your mistress of a designer wouldn't even know which way is the door in this industry." Evan's face showed unwillingness, anger. After a long while it seemed as if the gods had drained all his strength, and his voice fell very low. "Grace, I know I was wrong. Vivian can't compare to you at all." I raised a hand to silence him. "Evan, from the moment you chose her, from the moment I signed my name on the surgical consent form, we were finished." I walked to the desk, opened the bottom drawer, took out a folder, and pushed it toward him. "This is what you've always wanted, the original inspiration manuscript and early structural simulations for the Municipal Library Expansion Project. That was one of the key projects that established E.G. Design's early reputation. The core concept came entirely from my hand. Evan had tried 1,000 subtle maneuvers to steal the archive. Now it's yours. Take it, and with your mistress designer, go and patch up your E.G. design. I wish you both success." I picked up the desk phone. "Tina, show them out." The office door was tapped softly. Tina stuck her head in and, politely addressing the frozen Evan, said, "Mr. Evan, this way please." Evan's gaze shifted from the folder on the desk to my face, complicated, full of regret and unwillingness. He didn't speak again, nor did he touch the file. He followed Tina out. Silence settled in the office. I picked up the folder and walked over to the shredder. Everything that had been could not be mended, just like those shreds of paper, forever irreparable. Tina knocked and came back in, holding a plain paper box in her hands, unlabeled and tied with a simple gray ribbon. "Miss Grace, it just arrived. It was specifically addressed to you." I took the box and opened it. There was no card, only a large bunch of white lisianthus beaded with water. Cradling the bouquet, I walked to the window. The city's outline blurred in the curtain of rain, but I was sure a new blueprint would be crisply drawn beneath my hand. The white lisianthus sat in a glass jar on the windowsill, bringing a touch of life to the rainy office. I didn't ask who had sent them. After Evan barged in that time, there was no further word from him, though news about EG Design kept coming. The commercial space project Vivian was in charge of completely fell apart. The construction drawings were riddled with errors, the cost of rework was huge, and the schedule was severely delayed. The client filed a direct complaint with the industry association, demanded massive compensation, and even threatened to sue them. Word got around that Evan was in a panic, scrambling everywhere, begging people to help lower the compensation. A few days later, more news came. Several of EG Design's core designers handed in their resignations en masse. EG Design was left hollowed out. Only Evan stayed, along with a few newly hired, inexperienced juniors. Vivian's name still hung on the firm's website as design director, like a bad joke. Sophia turned the computer screen toward me. On the bulletin board of the local Design Industry Association's website, a notice was posted, announcement of a hearing concerning projects related to EG Design Studio. The time and place were written clearly. Below it was an attached summary of the preliminary investigation, explicitly naming technical failures in projects overseen by Vivian. "Are you going to the hearing?" Sophia asked. I closed the page. "No, I'm not. It's a waste of time. That's such a shame, to see them embarrassed in public. Will their embarrassment speed up the schedule for my studio's new project?" I picked up the drawings on the table. "Xingjing is pushing for the final structural scheme of the city living room. I have to go over parameters with the structural engineer this afternoon." Sophia curled her lip. "Fine, workaholic." On the day of the hearing, the rain grew heavier. I finished checking the last few nodes with the structural engineer in the studio. The sky outside had already dimmed. Sophia stormed in, hair dampened in places by the rain. "My God, didn't you see?" she said, taking a big gulp of water. Evan looked as black as the bottom of a pot. Those old guys at the association showed no mercy. The questions they asked were downright brutal. They made Vivian walk through the project, and she stammered. She couldn't even explain the basic stress analysis and was driven to tears right there. Sophia told it with relish. "You know Zhang Lao from the association, the stickler, he actually slammed the table and said that having a designer of that caliber as a director is a disgrace to the profession. He said EG Design's leadership bears inescapable responsibility." Evan tried to defend them, but the moment he opened his mouth he was shut down. "And then?" I asked, still leafing through the freshly printed structural drawings. "And then?" The association announced on the spot that EG Design's industry qualification would be suspended for 6 months, ordered an immediate overhaul, ruled that EG Design was fully liable to compensate for that failed project, and put Vivian's designer certification under review, meaning it might be revoked. Sophia exhaled. "Fantastic, goddamn fantastic." I closed the blueprints. "Got it. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, I've scheduled Mr. Vincent to see the new hall. Get the materials ready." Sophia paused, then smiled. "All right, boss." EG's design firm fell apart, tumbling like a toppled stack of blocks. Their license was suspended, which meant they no longer even qualified to bid. I heard Evan was selling off the properties and collections under his name at rock-bottom prices to plug that hole. Nobody was taking them, or they were being sold for peanuts. Vivian disappeared. Some said she returned to her hometown, others said she went to a small city in the south, completely leaving the industry. A month later, I received a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, it was Evan. "Grace, meet me." I had no interest in indulging him. "If it's important, say it on the phone." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I can't keep it up anymore, the firm has filed for bankruptcy." I replied, unsurprised. Another stretch of silence. "The things at home, when will you come to pick them up? Or should I bring them to you?" By home he meant that penthouse. When I moved out, I only took my essential belongings. "No need, you take care of it, sell it or throw it away, up to you." There was silence on the other end of the line. After a long moment, he finally spoke again. "What were you doing at the hospital that day?" My fingers tightened slightly around the phone. Did he know? Or had he guessed? "Getting treatment," I answered. "What illness?" he pressed. "Evan," my voice was very calm, "this is no longer your concern. Handle the house matters as soon as you can. Goodbye." Before he could say anything more, I cut the call. Putting the phone down, I looked at the model of the new building on the table. This was my present, my future. A few days later, Julian asked me to see the progress at the new building site. The huge foundation pit had already been dug. We wore safety helmets and walked along a temporarily erected passageway as the site roared around us and dust filled the air. Julian looked at the construction site and raised his voice. "The foundation's been poured well, ahead of schedule." I pointed to the engineer directing things in the distance. "The structural team is keeping a close eye." We walked to the edge of the excavation. Julian handed me a bottle of water and opened one himself, taking a few sips. "He reached out to you?" he asked suddenly, not looking at me, his gaze fixed on the machinery far off. "Yeah, the firm went bankrupt." Julian's tone was flat, without much inflection. "No surprise." "Did he ask about the hospital?" My hand paused while twisting the cap. "He did." "What did you say?" "That it's to see a doctor." Julian nodded and didn't press further. Wind swept across the construction site, lifting a cloud of dust. He pressed his hard hat down a little and, without making it obvious, turned so as to shield me from the direction of the sand. "Look ahead, Grace. This building will be a new start, a start for you alone." I nodded. "I know." A few more days passed. On the weekend I went to my parents for a meal. At the table, my mother cautiously asked about Evan. "I heard his company collapsed." "Is he all right?" "Bankrupt," I said as I speared a piece of food. "I think he's still in the city." My father sighed. "He was such a good kid back then, how did he?" He didn't finish the sentence. After the meal I drove back to the studio. At a red light, I casually glanced at the sidewalk. A man in a crumpled, old suit was walking slowly. The light turned green, the car behind honked and I stepped on the gas. Whether it was him didn't matter anymore, just like I had told Julian. I knew. I knew where my path lay. The night before the new hall opened. The enormous city living room was deserted, only a few temporary lights burning. I stood alone before that vast glass curtain wall, the city's scattered lights outside. Footsteps echoed in the empty space as Julian came over and stopped beside me. He said nothing, he, too, stared out. "Everything checked?" I asked. He handed me a file. Just one last tweak to the lighting system, and take another look at the opening procedures." I took it but didn't open it. "No need. Whatever you decided is fine." After a moment of silence he asked, "Nervous?" "A little." I answered honestly. The feeling was oddly unfamiliar, like the first time I handed in a design draft years ago. "It will become a landmark, your landmark." Julian's tone was certain, as if stating a fact. "It's ours," I corrected. Xingjing paid, his team coordinated, countless workers built it. He turned his head toward me, but you're the core. I didn't answer. The night breeze came through with a chill. Julian said, tomorrow we'll be busy. After it's over, dinner together? Just the two of us. His gaze was calm, carrying a question. That meaning had always been veiled by work before, like a gauze. Now the gauze had been lifted. I looked at the two of our reflections on the glass, very close. I turned to him and smiled, okay. The opening ceremony was lively, flashbulbs, microphones, a crowd. I wore a simple black suit and stood on the stage. Mr. Vincent of Xinjiang was speaking in a resonant voice. Julian stood beside me, a step away. When it was my turn, I walked to the microphone. The room fell quiet, many faces looked up. It's called dialogue. I spoke, my voice carried by the amplifier, not my dialogue, but the cities and the peoples, of light and shadow, of past and future. You walk in, stand here, that is where the dialogue begins. Applause rose. I stepped back half a pace and yielded the spot to Julian. He stepped forward to fill in the details about the space. The ribbon was cut, the unveiling. A huge red silk fell away, and the glass facade revealed itself whole, framing sunlight and distant buildings into a moving picture. The crowd surged in, gasps escaping. I stood at the entrance watching. People came over to shake my hand and offer congratulations. Grace. A voice rose above the din. I turned, Evan. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, a few meters away. Wearing an ill-fitting old suit, his hair grown out, falling over part of his forehead. His face was so thin his cheekbones jutted out, his eye sockets hollow. He didn't push forward, he just looked at me, his eyes empty, as if weighed down by something. We stared at each other across the crowd for a few seconds. He moved his lips but made no sound. Then he turned and quickly vanished into the stream of people at the entrance. Who was it? Julian, who had somehow come to my side, followed my gaze but saw only the surging crowd. I looked away. No one. Must have been a mistake. The ceremony concluded. Afterward there was a reception and media interviews, most of which Julian shielded me from. Dusk, the sky not yet fully dark, the city's lights just beginning to glow. Julian and I sat in a quiet corner of the rooftop terrace of the new wing. It wasn't open to the public yet, just the two of us. Simple dishes were set on the table, 2 glasses of red wine. Tired? Julian asked. Not really. I picked up my glass and stared at the deep red liquid. He said, today was a success. I watched the neon lights flicker on in the distance. This is only the first step, there's more to come. Julian nodded. I know. He picked up his glass and lightly tapped mine. To conversation, and to a new beginning. The glasses met with a crisp chime. Grace, he said, setting his glass down and looking me squarely in the face, very seriously, aside from conversation, could we also start over, between us? The night breeze lifted the strands of hair at his forehead, the terrace light wasn't bright, but his eyes were clear. I thought of the tea-house beyond dust, remembered him deflecting Evan's questioning for me, remembered the white lisianthus he gave me, remembered the gust of sand he shielded me from at the construction site. I paused and looked at him, haven't we always been beginning? He was startled for a moment, then the corner of his mouth curved little by little, the light in his eyes slowly welling up. Yes, he said softly, with certainty, always beginning. I lifted the glass and took a sip, the liquor slid down my throat, slightly astringent, then sweet on the aftertaste. A new blueprint laid out beneath my feet. Stroke by stroke, I draw it myself.